Okay, new day here. I've got the washers that I need to space this bracket out. I'm actually going to sandwich them between the bracket and the caliper instead of between the spindle and the bracket. That way the bolts that came with it have as much meat as possible into the actual spindle to hold this thing on. So I'm going to add a little Loctite to these and get this thing buttoned up. Alright, quick change of plan. I'm going to cover this hub up and I'm going to clean this caliper up and get some paint on it so it's nice and clean before we get it bolted on. Alright, I'm just going to use some silver caliper paint here to paint these calipers. Okay, so I cannot get the top caliper bolt in, and it's because of this spot right here. So the e-brake bracket is actually hitting the trailing arm here. You can see it right there, and it will not line up this bolt up here for that bolt to go in. So I'm gonna have to grind down that little corner right there to get that to work. Throw a little paint here on the caliper where I ground it down to keep it from rusting. Okay, we got it all bolted up. Everything looks pretty good. It is bolted up and spinning. It doesn't spin super freely because of this rust, but it looks good to me so far. I'm gonna get this e-brake cable hooked up, and then we should be done with this until the new rotors come in. we're gonna run into the same problem on this side where the bracket hits the trailing arm, so I've got to grind it down as well. Alright, well, it's a new day here. It's a new day because I ran out of time last time. We did get the calipers all repainted and they are ready to go. But I've got some good news. The drilled and slotted rotors that I said I could not get resurfaced locally, a buddy of mine contacted me on Facebook and said he could take care of it for me. And so I had my buddy take them over to him and he took care of it and they look really good. So we're gonna get those put on the car today and finish these brakes up. Before we put these pads into the caliper, I'm going to sand them down because these are the old pads. They've got a lot of meat left on them and we're going to reuse these. So I'm going to just scuff them up, make sure they're not glazed over so they get a good bite on the new rotors. Alright, so this is the caliper looking from the top down. I want to show you like the gap that I'm talking about that I've got to use a washer for a spacer on. Here's the Scarebird bracket, and the caliper normally would just come up and sit flush up against the Scarebird bracket and you would just bolt it on. But there's a gap right here, you can see it right there. It's just enough for this washer to fit through, see that? And this right here is what the washer's for, is to take up that difference. Because if I didn't put that on there, it's really going to pull it at a weird angle and then put it in a bind. So that's the reason why we're putting this washer between the bracket and the caliper to take up that space right there. Well, that finishes up the brakes for this car. Considering we didn't spend much money at all, I think they turned out really nice. I mean, they look nice on the car, and I think they're gonna do the job to stop the car. It doesn't weigh a lot. It's gonna be fine. So, moving on from the brakes, the next step that I'm gonna take on this car is most likely going to be body work. So body work is really gonna be a labor-intensive job where we're gonna have to sand down the whole car. We're gonna have to pull it apart, all this trim work. I'm gonna try to pull off as much of that as I can. Some of it I'm not gonna be able to pull off because it's got these clips on here that are really hard to find. So I'll have to mask off some of this stuff. But everything that I can pull off, I'm gonna pull off, and I'm gonna sand it, just start moving forward with paint. I painted the 1988 CRX over here, and it took me a while to do. And I'm hoping this one will go a little bit quicker because the paint on it is in much nicer condition. There's just some bad areas here that I'm gonna have to really dig into and fix. So just stay tuned for the next episode. Hopefully we'll start digging into here, pulling it apart, sanding it. Catch you then.